Hello and welcome. Black Hammer is an ongoing series written by Jeff Lemire. The core title is illustrated by Dean Ormston. The numerous spin-off miniseries are illustrated by a variety of artists, published by Dark Horse starting in 2016. The one thing that has to be noted about Black Hammer is it's not a standard ongoing series. There is an ongoing story, but it's broken up into a few different series. The first being Black Hammer, which is 13 issues in total. This is followed by Black Hammer Age of Doom, which is 12 issues in length. The next core title will be the forthcoming Black Hammer Rebirth. On top of that, there are spin-offs about side characters and one crossover with the Justice League. There's been a lot of material in just 4 years. Basically, Black Hammer follows the Hellboy model of publishing, meaning at a casual glance, it's convoluted. For the most part, one is safe reading the core title first, and the spin-offs in any order. Taken together, the main series and the spin-offs are classic world building. Much like Lemire is doing with Gideon Falls, he begins with a small, isolated location, and then, piece by piece, he begins to expand the scope beyond its humble roots. In both cases, there is a central object to focus the reader's attention. In Gideon Falls, it's the Black Barn. In Black Hammer, it's the farm. These central objects and their reason or purpose are surrounded in mystery. By expanding our understanding of the world, these objects are given a context, thus revealing the mystery. The biggest difference between Gideon Falls and Black Hammer is the focus. Gideon Falls is intentionally limited in scope. It remains in the title city with a set group of people, while Black Hammer is expansive. It branches out into many different locations and includes secondary and tertiary characters. Both titles are an interesting case study of allowing the environment to emerge within a story. The setting is treated like a character. It's slowly revealed through circumstance. It's a very powerful technique that Lemire uses precisely. Reportedly, Black Hammer was an idea Lemire proposed to Dark Horse in 2008. But due to contractual obligations, he wasn't able to start work on it until 2014. Then, when he did have time in his schedule, he was too busy to illustrate it. So, Dean Ormston was brought into the project to provide artwork. Unfortunately, early in the process, Ormston suffered a cerebral hemorrhage, and this further delayed the publication of the series until 2016. A side effect of this health issue was Ormston's right side being partially paralyzed. During the recovery process, Ormston basically had to learn to draw again. To his credit and dedication, if there's a difference in quality in the artwork, it's definitely not noticeable. It's very consistent. Speaking of Ormston's artwork, it just works. There's a quality to it that slightly evokes the style of late Golden Age comics, yet it's filtered through modern sensibilities, with a range that's broader than the style it captures. It's expressive and economical, containing the exact amount of detail necessary to communicate emotion and tone. It gives Black Hammer a very specific aesthetic and feel, one that complements the evolving story. It's a style so integral, it would be difficult to imagine anyone other than Ormston providing the visuals. Black Hammer is about a group of superheroes trapped in a small community following a crisis type of event. For the past decade, they've accepted their exile, and they try to live their lives on a quiet farm while hiding their past from those around them. Through the course of the series, the reality they've found themselves in begins to slowly break down. Eventually, they discover the source of their imprisonment and the reason why this exile was necessary. At the end of Age of Doom, there's a soft reset of the premise. If one were to stop right there, they'd have a complete story. According to Lemire, this point is 1/3 of the overall intended story. A series of related spin-offs will be published before the core title begins again. All of the characters in Black Hammer have some tenuous or direct connection to other superheroes from the Golden or Silver Age. For the most part, each character is a mashup of a few similar sources. Although, of course, they all have their own unique qualities which separates them from the source material. There was only one character, Dr. Starr, that was a problem. This character is a rather clear homage to Starman by James Robinson. In fact, the character's civilian identity is Jimmy Robinson. This obvious homage prompted a conversation between Lemire and a, quote, unspecified publisher, unquote. The end result being, Dr. Starr was renamed Dr. Andromeda, and his costume was slightly altered to be more unique. The character, Black Hammer, is a mix of both Thor and Orion from New Gods. There's also a suggestion of Black Racer. This is mainly indicated by Black Hammer having a civilian identity and a human family. Overall, he's a classic Jack Kirby cosmic character. It should be noted, the original Black Hammer is dead at the beginning of the series. His daughter eventually takes on the legacy. Abraham Slam is a mix of Captain America and Wildcat or Daredevil, I believe. His early inspiration to become a hero is based on Captain America, but his training and development appear to be based on Wildcat/Daredevil. Colonel Weird is a parallel to both Adam Strange, because he's a man of two worlds, and Shade the Changing Man, who taps into an area of existence that produces madness, or Doctor Strange, who also traveled in odd planes of existence. Weird's companion, Talkie Walkie, is a generic 50s-era robot. Golden Gale is a straight-up female equivalent of Captain Marvel. It may be the least subtle analog of the entire title. Another obvious parallel is Barbalien, who is clearly Martian Manhunter, although there is a mild suggestion of John Carter too. Madame Dragonfly is mostly a mix of all supernatural DC horror title hosts. For the most part, these characters represent the dominant genres of the Silver Age: superheroes, supernatural horror, fantasy, and science fiction. These weren't the only genres, but they were the most prevalent during the late 50s until the early 70s. Like a parent explaining to a child where their dead pet has gone, these heroes have gone to the farm. The Black Hammer farm is their final resting place. It's their limbo. This is their reward for a lifetime of heroics. There's a reasonable degree of irony to this situation. All of the characters had retired before the crisis event. They were pulled out of retirement and given a non-choice between a heroic sacrifice or allowing the end of everything. This crisis event gave them the opportunity for a grand finale to their story, after which they were expected to leave the stage and quietly not exist. And, tragically, no one would ever be aware of the sacrifice they made. The parallel between this and the characters that were wiped out in Crisis, or any reboot type of event, is quite clear. For the perceived greater good, for the legitimacy of the superhero genre, they are put to death. These iconic figures are anachronisms of a simpler time, when the medium was still evolving and maturing. But the medium, as it exists today, has no place for them. Without dramatic revisions to the core concepts, the characters just don't work in modern times. And worse yet, they look like embarrassments when too much is changed. The solution to this issue is to force them back into action for a conclusion. Or, more accurately, to be publicly executed so they don't exist in the background and complicate continuity with their presence, much like DC did in 1985 with Crisis on Infinite Earths. From a certain perspective, Black Hammer could be seen as a commentary or criticism of deconstruction, or more likely, the effect of deconstruction on superheroes. All of the characters are broken and struggling to exist within their human form. That is, they pretend to be normal, despite being incredible mythic beings with extraordinary capabilities. They are acting against their inherent or implied nature, and they only do that because that's what's expected of them. That is, the characters in Black Hammer are expected to be relatable to both the people in the comic and to the readers of the comic. After all, the current approach to superheroes, the one that evolved when the medium matured, is that superheroes are human beings with an unfair advantage. So to compensate for this unfair advantage, they have to have flaws and contradictions so that we, the audience, can identify with them. As an example, doing the right thing because you can isn't a motivation that works for a modern audience. It's a quaint sentiment. But in these overly complex times, this implied benevolence and superiority, taken together, feels condescending. There has to be more. There has to be some broken personality trait, or a higher calling, or a respect for the labors of the common person, or whatever. They need an internal moral struggle, as well as a physical, obvious conflict. First and foremost, our heroes need to be human or humanized, sometimes at the expense of their heroic traits. This way their achievements seem within the capability of ordinary mortals. This way they don't feel like benevolent gods. At least, that's the negative implication of deconstruction as it applies to the genre. Within this context, the heroes in Black Hammer are a result of that deconstruction. Their decade-long attempt to be relatable and normal has reached a breaking point. It's an approach that can no longer be sustained. The message being, if such a straightforward message can be determined, is that this overly realistic approach has run its course. There is a middle ground where these characters, their traits, and their legacy can exist. Black Hammer, in its totality, may be an example of that common area where classic characters and modern sensibilities harmoniously coexist. Finally, the comic suggests these characters and their legacy shouldn't be erased because they're unsuitable according to modern standards. That's rewriting the history of the medium to only include the bits that aren't embarrassing. All of it should be remembered and preserved. Doing so can only contribute to the greater good of the superhero genre. That's one interpretation of its subtext. Certainly, there may be others. After all, the series is not complete. Its overall direction is uncertain. At the moment, this appears to be the foundation of the premise. Putting the subtext aside, Black Hammer is a solid story with an interesting central mystery. Although it's hard not to notice that Black Hammer contains three of Lemire's most common motifs: a small town, a morally conflicted priest, and a dysfunctional family. The small town and the morally conflicted priest are self-explanatory. The dysfunctional family is an extension of these heroic characters taking on strictly human roles. Abraham Slam is the father figure who bears the burden of keeping this family together. Madame Dragonfly is the distant mother. Her presence is dismissed, and her control and influence over the family is overlooked. Colonel Weird is the wayward son. Whenever he shows up, it's uncertain if he'll disrupt the family or bring it together. Golden Gale is the rebellious daughter, who is more mature than her appearance suggests. Barbalien is the sardonic uncle. Talkie Walkie is the put-upon maid who acts like a substitute mother. This dynamic has quite a range that's explored within the series, although the largest focus is on Abraham Slam and Golden Gale, because these two have contrasting perspectives. Abraham is trying to make this situation work, and to be happy for the greater good of the family. Gale is inconsolable and petty. She's only thinking of herself, and since her needs aren't being addressed, she openly rebels against the greater good of the family. Barbalien metaphorically sits between these two extremes. He tries to fit in and be comfortable on the farm, but at the same time, he commiserates with Gale. In other words, he tries to be normal and then complains about the effort. There are a few weak points, though. The resolution to the central mystery is a touch basic. It works, but it feels less satisfying than it should. Also, there is a plot convenience that occurs in the middle of Age of Doom that really stands out. To his credit, Lemire builds in a heightened sense of urgency at that moment, so one is distracted by the events rapidly occurring, and the action carries one's attention away from this device. It's not that it doesn't make sense, it's that it's a tad convenient. Still, one has to appreciate the writing misdirection that occurs simultaneously with this convenience. Another trope of Lemire's writing is also present, and that's the reliance on a metaphysical or spiritual interlude to explore character. A portion of Age of Doom is one such journey. The narrative involving the characters on the farm essentially pauses and waits for Lucy to go from being Black Hammer to becoming Black Hammer. This narrative pause gives Lemire the opportunity to fill out the backstory of the characters on the farm. It's a very economical way to tell two complementary stories at once. The technique works as intended, but it doesn't feel organic. It feels like a structural necessity and an excuse to take a trip through the Vertigo universe. In other words, the plot treads water while character beats are explored. In the end, Black Hammer is a look at specific, memorable beats within comic book history and the characters that exemplify those points in time. Concurrently, it appears to comment on the effect of deconstruction and how that effect influences our perception of that history. However, with only 1/3 of the intended story complete, this is a tentative evaluation. Black Hammer has a fair amount baked into its concept, and there's still more to reveal. If it is a commentary or criticism of deconstruction, one has to presume there will be a reconstruction of some nature. That is, it will build a common ground, where these established archetypes can live and breathe again. This video is brought to you courtesy of these very fine people. If you're not already subscribed to this channel, I encourage you to click the subscribe button and support Overlord Comics. If you'd like to go a step further, click the join button and choose the option most suitable for you.